Hello, my name is David Duffy. Today I'm going to share healing thoughts about Alzheimer's disease. This is episode 22. Let's think how the brain works. We know that the right side of the brain has nerves that control the muscles on the left side of the body, and the motor cortex in the left side of the brain controls the muscles in the right side of the body. We also know that the brain consists of a side lobe called the temporal lobe on each side. And in that part of the brain is the area that remembers sound and records hearing. And there's a inner part of it that's shaped like a seahorse that is called the hippocampus. And that has to do with remembering things, taking in information and remembering it until it's processed and stored somewhere else in the brain. Now, the hippocampus also has something to do with remembering where we are, remembering area, the place that we have a memory. It also has the capacity to register fear and emotions. So it's rather complicated. Now, when we get older, the brain tends to decline in function. A normal person has an increase in the capacity to remember as a teenager, and then in its 20s, and when you're in your 20s and beyond, it slowly declines. It has been shown that when you're under chronic stress, when you have an experience that causes post-traumatic stress syndrome, that tends to cause shrinkage in the hippocampus. The part of the brain that remembers is going to shrink or get smaller. And that is correlated with difficulty in short-term memory. What is short-term memory? Okay, somebody just called, they're going to tell you the telephone number to call back, and you can remember it enough to write it down. When the doctor is testing your memory and he says, I'm going to repeat 7 numbers and I want you to repeat that back. Now, when you have the capacity to do that, you have short-term memory. A typical mental status thing, they will give you 3 objects to remember, and then a minute later, you're supposed to remember a shoe, the color red, and a balloon, and if you can't remember that, there's a sign of impairment. Okay. So what is Alzheimer's disease? Alzheimer's disease is a degeneration of the nerve, that the brain cells that initially shows poor recent memory. In 1901, a German psychiatrist named Alois Alzheimer made a very concise description of this process of dementia. There was an elderly lady who was demented, and that was his clinical description, and that process of the disease of brain deterioration is now called Alzheimer's disease, because he kind of first described it. Okay. Let's think here. We have a group of patients age 55 to 85, and they are tested, 1,000 are tested for their memory. And, there's some decline, they can't remember so much. But if you compare that with another group of people with Alzheimer's disease, they have great difficulty. The Alzheimer patients have marked difference in remembering. So there's something different about that. What is it? A patient who is aware of himself and is starting to forget things, he will not remember where he is. He will try to find a word and he can't remember it. And then he'll say, well, the thing that does this or that. He can't remember a specific word. What did you have for breakfast? He has no idea. He can't remember what happened an hour or two ago. In order to function, and he's going to pretend to know the answer, and a person with Alzheimer's will tend to make things up. That's called confabulation. What did you have for breakfast? Oh, I had a this and this and this. He just says what, like, you think he wants you to hear. Now let's see. There are approximately 30 million people in the world with Alzheimer's disease. Approximately 70% of the people with dementia, it's caused by Alzheimer's disease. The earliest symptoms are kind of not paying attention, unable to do abstract thinking, their vocabulary is reduced, and this is called mild cognitive impairment, kind of on the borderline. In the middle stage of Alzheimer's, of dementia, their lack of vocabulary becomes prominent. They stop reading and writing. And they begin to lose other functions. Now, the cause of Alzheimer's disease is not clear. Originally, they thought that amyloid was causing damage to the brain. Amyloid is a sheet of protein strands that stain red and look like a sheet of cloth. And in Alzheimer's disease, when a person dies with Alzheimer's disease and they they cut up the brain and analyze it, they will find areas in the brain where the nerves are filled with this red staining plaque, and it's called amyloid, okay? They originally thought that was causing the problem, but more recently, they think a fragment of that is triggering the destruction of the cell. It's interacting with the metabolism that destroys the cell. In medicine, there's something called programmed cell destruction or apoptosis, always that big words. Now, another aspect of Alzheimer's disease is when they measure the chemistry of the brain, the neurotransmitter in the brain, one is called acetylcholine, and a person with Alzheimer's dementia has a low concentration of acetylcholine. So they thought that was the problem. But when they stimulated the brain and gave it things that would create acetylcholine, the memory did not increase. So a good thought, but it didn't fit. Then we have a protein that's called tau protein. Tau protein is something that has to do with the little microtubules in the cells, these little tubules that kind of hold the cell open and kind of, it's like the skeleton of the cell. And in Alzheimer's disease, what happens is that those tubes get into clusters, and they're called neurofibrillatory tangles. So we see an Alzheimer's brain with tangles, loss of cells, plaques, and the brain has shrunk and the function of the brain has deteriorated. Okay. What causes that? We're talking about a process of destroying brain cells. When you have a house and it's filled with junk, over time, you can't use the garage anymore because that's filled with junk. You can't fill the attic is filled with junk. The basement is filled with junk. The guest room is filled with junk, and the living space has functionally shrunk. Well, that's kind of what we're describing here. Modern medicine likes to explain the cause of a disease by seeing a picture of an anatomical destruction or biochemical evidence, okay? I would submit that those are the end results of the disease, not the cause. We know that people that are mentally engaged and active and reading and interacting with people and being active and learning new things and being physically active, all of those things delay or prevent Alzheimer's disease. The brain is an amazing organ. We can think, reason, feel, act. But what happens if we don't use our brain? What happens if we misuse our brain? What happens if we are full of anger, hatred, lonely, depressed? How is our brain being affected by that? Can we change that? Yes, that's the whole point of self-reliant medicine. We want to help people live up to their potential. We want to use the brain in a positive way. Now, an older person is in a nursing home and they're wheeled to the activity room. They sit and stare at the television for hour after hour. They're fed, they're kept alive, but they're not really stimulating the brain. The brain, when a person has been working very hard in an intense focus and has misdirected the purpose in their life, they're in a self-destructive pattern. The body carries out the experience that you do to it. You inherit the results of your actions. They love to think, they love to plot, they love to scheme, and over time, they lose it. They've ruined their lives, and they are now a shell of themselves. They're just empty, and they just cannot do anything except recall the past, and they deteriorate into a vegetative state. How do we help those people? We want to, as a person gets older, we want to keep them active in the capacity that they still retain. We want to use their potential to the maximum that they can. That means that having a person retire and taking up a new hobby and being involved with people, that's why it's good to have older people living with a family. In many countries, it's the custom for the parents to live with the children and have an extended family. In the United States, it's more a question of putting a person in a nursing home because the mother and the father are working and they can't be home with them and things like that. And there's a nice big industry to take care of older people and keep them alive as long as they have insurance. We want to protect our brains. We want to do the things that give us the nutrition, give us the purpose, give us the joy, give us the love, and encourage our friends and relatives to do the same. My mother died at the age of 98 of colon cancer. And at the time she died, she was mildly demented. She had declined in her capacity. She used to be an avid newspaper reader, but that kind of slid. Fortunately, she lived in the same house that she lived in for many years because my son and his wife stayed with her and helped her. She was pretty independent in terms of fending for herself. And as she deteriorated, we did get help at home to help her out. And she died with joy. We want to, so many people want to take memory, you can take this medicine or that medicine to improve your brain and all this kind of stuff. I guess if you want to do that, you can, but that's really not the answer. It's a question of using your brain properly and not try to reverse reverse your aging. Okay, this concludes our little discussion on Alzheimer's. Next time, we're going to talk about pseudo healing.